Dobrý deň. Dobrý deň prajem, vážené dámy, vážení páni, vážení zástupcovia štátnych inštitúcií, samosprávy aj akademickej obce, ctení hostia tu v sále, ako aj hostia na online prenose. Dobrý deň prajem. Dear guest speakers, also good morning.
Prechádzam do slovenčiny, prajem dobré ráno, vážení hostia. Je nám radosťou, že vás tu máme.
Na druhom ročníku medzinárodnej konferencie Green Building Summit 2023, ktorá sa koná pod záštitou prezidentky Slovenskej republiky pani Zuzany Čaputovej a primátora hlavného mesta Slovenskej republiky Bratislavy pána Matúša Valla. Tento rok sa stretáme tu spoločne opäť a dnes to bude na tému udržateľných mestských štvrtí Future Proof Urban Districts. Toto podujatie sa uskutočňuje aj vďaka podpore našich ctených partnerov, ktorých podporu si veľmi vážim a mnohí už dlhoročnú. Mnohí sú naše členské spoločnosti a dnes sú to títo partneri summitu. Generálni partneri spoločnosť CORWIN, spoločnosť J&T Real Estate, spoločnosť WOOP Banka. Hlavnými partnermi dnešného Green Building Summitu sú spoločnosti Kaufland a spoločnosť Saint-Gobain Slovensko. A partnermi dnešného summitu sú spoločnosti Šuko a VIT Slovakia. Naozaj veľmi pekne ďakujeme za vašu podporu a tešíme sa, že aj vďaka vám môžeme dnes prinášať do tohto nádherného priestoru tieto inšpiratívne a dôležité témy. Pre hladký a príjemný priebeh dnešného dňa by som si dovolila ešte zo pár organizačných informácií pre vás hosti priamo v sále, ako aj pre online hosti. Celá konferencia bude prebiehať v anglickom jazyku, teda okrem tohto úvodu práve teraz, a bude celý čas simultánne tlmočená. V prípade potreby sú k dispozícii staničky s tlmočením u hostesiek priamo pri vstupe, takže pre tých, ktorí by ste sa ešte predsa rozhodli, tak nech sa páči, môžete využiť túto možnosť pri vstupe. Do diskusie ste veľmi vítaní sa pripojiť a otázky môžete klásť prostredníctvom aplikácie Slido, kde by sa vám malo už zobrazovať aj QR kód a heslo je #GBS23. Poprosím vás, ak by ste si mohli vypnúť alebo aspoň stíšiť mobilné telefóny. No a ešte pár informácií pre našich online hostí. V ľavom hornom rohu si môžete vybrať jazyk streamu, buď slovenčinu alebo angličtinu, a na pravej strane vašej obrazovky máte integrovaný chat cez Slido na kladenie otázok v rámci diskusie, takže aj vy ste veľmi srdečne vítaní, aby ste kládli otázky pre našich panelistov, diskutujúcich a speakerov. V prípade problémov s vašim online prihlásením, čomu veríme nedôjde, máte v potvrdzovacom e-maili aj kontakt s uvedením čísla na technickú podporu. A týmto by som vám rada v krátkosti ešte ozrejmila dnešný priebeh dnešného dňa. Budeme mať 3 programové bloky. V rámci týchto programových blokov sa potom dostaneme k viac informáciám v nasledujúcej informácii už priamo od moderátorov blokov. Medzi jednotlivými blokmi po prvom bloku bude obedná prestávka a po obede bude jeden coffee break a po odbornom programe konferencie budeme pokračovať, verím, že vo veľmi príjemnej a inšpiratívnej atmosfére ďalej. Bude to na hornom poschodí, upper deck, kde bude krásny výhľad a dnes nám naozaj aj to počasie praje, tak verím, že to bude naozaj príjemný deň. Rada vás budem sprevádzať s týmito aktuálnymi informáciami počas dňa, takže nemusíte si držať celý program v hlave, ale aby ste mali aspoň základnú predstavu takto na začiatku. No a po týchto úvodných organizačných informáciách teraz už pozývam na pódium hostiteľov dnešného dňa, zástupcov 2 hostiteľských organizácií, Slovenskej komory architektov a Slovenskej rady pre zelené budovy. A nimi sú pán Ilias Koček, predseda Slovenskej komory architektov, a pán Pavol Kukura, predseda predstavenstva Slovenskej rady pre zelené budovy. Nech sa páči, páni, vitajte, ale dovolte mi, dámy majú prednosť a keďže máme dnes tú česť, že pani prezidentka nám aj poslala video pozdrav, tak teraz by som poprosila réžiu o spustenie video pozdravu od pani prezidentky Slovenskej republiky, pani Zuzany Čaputovej.
Vážené dámy a páni, milí hostia. Nosnou témou dnešného samitu zelených budov sú udržateľné mestské štvrte. Dnes už málo kto spochybňuje, aký výrazný dopad má zmena klímy na našu planetu a najbližšie prostredie, v ktorom žijeme. Takmer polovica svetovej populácie v súčasnosti žije v mestách a aglomeráciách. Do roku 2050 to pravdepodobne budú až 2/3. Ak chceme do roku 2050 dosiahnuť klimatickú neutralitu, veľký podiel na nevyhnutných opatreniach budú niesť práve mestá a ich obyvatelia. Na to je treba myslieť už dnes, nie zajtra. Osobitne oceňujem zameranie tohto podujatia. Udržateľné mestské štvrte a drevo ako znovu objavený stavebný materiál. Drevo má u nás historickú tradíciu a je to obnoviteľný zdroj. V ére udržateľnosti musíme využiť každý nástroj na potrebnú zmenu. Zastávané územie zaberá približne 1/10 plochy našej krajiny. To nevyzerá ako veľa, napriek tomu je z hľadiska dopadov klimatickej krízy jedno z najzraniteľnejších. Zároveň má najlepší potenciál vysporiadať sa s týmito zmenami. Moja kancelária vníma klimatickú krízu ako naliehavú výzvu v súčasnosti a preberá svoj podiel zodpovednosti na jej riešení. Ako prvá verejná inštitúcia na Slovensku sme si osvojili ambíciu stať sa klimaticky neutrálnou kanceláriou najneskôr do roku 2030. Naším príkladom chceme motivovať ďalšie úrady, organizácie a inštitúcie, ale aj súkromný sektor, aby si po našom vzore osvojili štandardy zelenej inštitúcie a nasmerovali obnovu a prevádzku svojich budov k udržateľnosti. Projektom Prezidentská zelená pečať chceme oceniť nadštandardnú obnovu verejných budov a podporiť udržateľné riešenia. Budem rada, ak sa k nej pridáte. Zároveň vám želám veľa inšpiratívnych podnetov a diskusí.
Ďakujeme veľmi pekne. A teraz by som poprosila pána Kukuru.
Dobrý deň, dámy a páni. Dovolte mi, aby som vás privítal v mene Slovenskej rady pre zelené budovy na našej už tradičnej akcii. Pre nás, pre Zelenú radu, je to v podstate 10. ročník. Poznali ste túto našu akciu v minulosti pod názvom Udržateľnosť v architektúre a stavebníctve, ale vzhľadom na medzinárodný charakter, silný medzinárodný charakter tejto konferencie sme si to dovolili zmeniť na Green Building Summit a zároveň prizvať nového, veľmi vzácneho partnera, Slovenskú komoru architektov, vďaka ktorému máme práve také dobré obsadenie našich speakerov. Ale v prvom rade by som ešte chcel poďakovať pani prezidentke za videoprejav, ktorým podporila túto akciu. Bohužiaľ, nemôže sa zúčastniť osobne, takže nám nahrala ten videoprejav a zároveň by som jej poďakoval za záštitu, ktorú dala našej konferencie. Treba povedať, že toto není jediná podpora pani prezidentky stavebníctvu alebo udržateľnému stavebníctvu. Výnimočnosť prezidentskej kancelárie je už aj v tom, že chce byť do roku 2030 uhlíkovo neutrálna, čo je možné, že bude prvá celosvetovo prezidentská kancelária, ktorá bude zero carbon. A druhá veľká akcia, ktorú by som chcel spomenúť, je práve tá prezidentská zelená pečať, o ktorej pani prezidentka hovorila vo videoprejave. Je to spoločný projekt SKGBC a pani prezidentky a cieľom je podporiť udržateľnú obnovu verejných budov, pretože keďže teraz sa chystá vlna obnov verejných budov, radi by sme, aby boli obnovené naozaj do udržateľného štandardu a do takého štandardu, ktorý prežije ďalšie roky aj z hľadiska požiadaviek, ktoré sú na budovy. Ale teda späť ku konferencii. Táto konferencia vždycky sa zaoberala tými najaktuálnejšími trendami. Minulého roku sme hovorili o obnove, práve kvôli tomu plánu obnovy. A dnes je to, okrem tej základnej témy zelených budov, sú to udržateľné štvrte a drevo. A prečo udržateľné štvrte? 3 zo 4 obyvateľov Európy žijú v mestách. Mesta sú tvorené budovami. Ak chceme dosiahnuť tie ciele, ktoré sme si vytýčili na rok 2030 a 50, tak musíme aj mesta a štvrte pohnúť smerom k tej uhlíkovej neutralite. Ale zároveň musíme myslieť na to, že chceme, aby tí obyvatelia v tých mestách mali zdravé životné prostredie, aby mali svoje hospodárske a sociálne príležitosti. A prečo drevo? No drevo preto, lebo všetci máme radi drevo. Drevo je materiál, ktorý je príjemný. Drevo je udržateľný materiál. A drevo je slovenský materiál. Veď máme tu lesov toľko ako málo ktorá krajina, tak by sme radi, aby sa drevo využívalo v stavebníctve a bohužiaľ zatiaľ na Slovensku ešte tie drevené konštrukčné materiály nie sú používané v takom množstve, ako by mohli byť, ale ako by sme chceli. Takže, čo sa týka stavebníctva, tak na prvom mieste je vždycky architekt. Architekt začína a bez neho to jednoducho nejde. Tak preto sme radi, že môžeme na tejto konferencii prezentovať excelentných speakerov z hľadiska architektúry aj excelentné príklady z hľadiska toho, čo urobili. Takže z mojej strany všetko, prajem príjemný deň a mnoho nových vedomostí.
Ďakujem veľmi pekne, Palo. A poprosím aj pána Iliu Skočeka. Nech sa páči.
Dobrý deň prajem všetkým. Teším sa, že ste prijali pozvanie sem na pontón a na druhý ročník konferencie SKGBC. Pri 2 ročníkoch sa ešte nedá hovoriť o tradícii, ale tak verím tomu, že takto nejak sa tradícia začína. A teším sa, že sa podarilo nadväzať na ten minulý ročník a podarilo sa vyskladať veľmi bohatý program a veľmi zohnať vynikajúcich speakerov. Komora je veľmi hrdá na to, že je vlastne spoluorganizátorom takéhoto kvalitného podujatia. Je totiž jednou z našich úloh snažiť sa zveľaďovať stavebnú kultúru na Slovensku, prezentovať architektúru ako jeden z kvalitatívnych parametrov stavieb, rovnako chrániť naše architektonické dedičstvo a hlavne snažiť sa formovať dedičstvo, ktoré my tu necháme našim ďalším generáciám, to znamená našim deťom. A verím a teším sa, že dnešný program bude skutočným obohatením, no a moja radosť je o to väčšia, že toto je môj posledný príhovor v úlohe predsedu Komory slovenských architektov. Trénoval som teda moje rečnícke zručnosti po 4 roky na rôznych podujatiach, aj na golfovom turnaji architektov, na BIM konferencii o nízkoenergetických domoch, pasívnych domoch, panelovej diskusii s Jánom Gélom a naposledy na zimnej olympiáde architektúr na Táloch. No a tak vidíte sami, že veľa sa toho na mňa za tie 4 roky nalepilo, takže nebudem zdržovať, nechám to radšej na odborníkov, tak dnes, ako aj o 2 týždne pri voľbách do orgánov komory. Pekný deň všetkým prajem.
Ďakujem veľmi pekne vám obom páni a budem sa tešiť na celý deň v vašej spoločnosti a teda špeciálne s vami, pán Skoček. A verím, že pri mnohých ďalších príležitostiach, aj keď v inej funkcii možno. Ďakujem veľmi pekne a teším sa tomuto spojeniu Slovenskej komory architektov so Slovenskou radou pre zelené budovy. Verím, že to oceňujete aj vy a týmto môžeme považovať dnešnú konferenciu Green Building Summit za oficiálne otvorenú a už nastáva ten čas, kedy sa dostaneme po tých úvodných ceremoniálnych záležitostiach naozaj k programu a týmto by som rada na pódiu predstavila 2 moderátorov, teda aby nás tu nebolo málo na stage, ale budete to mať zase trošičku pestrejšie. Takže dnešnými moderátormi odborných blokov sú pani Oľga Miháliková z Slovenskej komory architektov, ktorou je riaditeľkou Slovenskej komory architektov a kolega Marek Kremeň, ktorý je najnovšie, keď sa už o tých voľbách bavíme, podpredsedom predstavenstva Slovenskej rady pre zelené budovy. Takže dobré ráno prajem, Olinka aj Marek.
Dobrý deň.
Dobrý deň.
Vítajte medzi nami a ako som spomínala, tešíme sa tomuto spojeniu a naozaj to vidieť aj v matérii, pretože Olinka si už berie aj naše zelené farby, takže Green Building Summit a Green Building Council, už sa to spája.
Prvý plán bolo vždy moje zjavne.
Je to krásne a chcem sa len spýtať, ako teda dnes je ten D-Day po všetkých tých týždňoch príprav. Ideme na to?
Ideme na to, ja si myslím, že icebreaker už v podaní Iliu Skočeka prebehol, takže to, čo tu mám napísané, môžem takto vyhodiť preč. Ďakujem, Ilia, za podporu.
Takže tým pádom ja by som odozdala slovo vám, pretože vy budete teraz tí, ktorí budete sprevádzať jednotlivé odborné bloky a panelové diskusie. A na tento moment je stage yours a nie mine. Takže prajem vám veľmi príjemný deň, plný inšpiratívnych stretnutí a inšpirácií od našich speakerov. Nech sa páči.
Ďakujeme, Vaši.
Ďakujem. A ja ťa teraz opustím a vidíme sa za chvíľočku.
Áno, Marek neodchádza. Nebojte sa, neostanete tu len so mnou. V princípe niečo k tomu, čo nás bude dnes čakať. Čiže začneme prvým blokom, ale povieme si niečo aj o tom, akým spôsobom budú prebiehať tie ďalšie bloky, ako budú na seba nadväzovať. A prípravný výbor konferencie, ktorého odbornými garantmi pre architektonickú časť bola pani Nora Vranová a pre oblasť udržateľnosti pán Pavel Kukura, od začiatku mal nejakú predstavu, že ten prvý blok by sa mal venovať budovám, druhý blok by sa mal viac venovať drevostavbám, využitiu dreva, rôznym nejakým aj technickým riešeniam, aspektom, vlastne drevu ako možnému riešeniu priblíženia sa k uhlíkovej neutralite, možno aj nejakým dôvodom, prečo sa to drevo na Slovensku až toľko nevyužíva a čo je potrebné urobiť preto, aby sa využívalo viac. A ten tretí blok mal byť ten, na ktorom je kladený dôraz, a to je vlastne to, čo hovorila alebo spomínala vo svojom príhovore už pani prezidentka, čiže blok o udržateľných mestských štvrtiach, o udržateľnom plánovaní, bird view, iná mierka. No a potom sme sa potešili, pretože naše prijatie prijal pán Patrik Lüth zo Snøhety, ktorý bude mať keynote speech a zrazu nedávalo zmysel limitovať jeho prednášku na budovy, keďže udržateľnosť je súčasťou tvorby Snøhety od jej založenia, od jej vzniku. A teraz prejdem do angličtiny, aby Patrik mohol kontrolovať, či to uvedenie bude správne. So Patrik Lüth has been with Snøhetta since 2005 and since 2011, managing the office of Snøhetta in Innsbruck. He has been involved in a number of international architectural competitions and submissions by Snøhetta, and is co-author of many very popular works, among others, the Swarovski project, Crystal World's Evolution, New Museum Quarter in Bolzano, the master plan for a new city quarter in Budapest, or the conversion of the site of an old tobacco factory in Verona. In March, he and his team won international design contest, also here in Bratislava, as you may know. And in cooperation with Studio Egret West and local partner Gro Architekti, he will work here. Patrik, the floor is yours.
So, well, thank you for having me. It's funny you talk about speaking and why it's sometimes unpleasant, but we need to do it because we need to tell each other what we have learned through the work of our project and through this very urgent topic of sustainability that we will be discussing today. So I think many of you know our company, and I will try to expand from where we come from, not only where we come from physically. This is the mountain called Snøhetta, so if you don't know that Snøhetta is not the name of a person, it's actually there were too many founders to choose those names, so we chose a landscape feature in the center of Norway because landscape architecture and the relation to context has always been very important for us at Snøhetta. The name of the lecture is called Creating Prototypes because I think we need to think in individual innovations that we can realize in small or large projects in order to gain the big picture and the knowledge to really transform our cities in the future. So Snøhetta has grown. We started in 1989 in Oslo, and now we have 7 studios around the globe. We have around 400 people working in the company, and this is still our headquarters in the center of Oslo, right at the fjord, very similar to here. We have the water right in front of our windows. And we're not only architects, we have urban designers, we have landscape architects, we have interior architects and product designers, and we truly believe in transdisciplinarity. So in all our projects, even if it may be a master plan project, we'll try to include an interior architect right from the beginning, because we think in this cross-collaboration, we can learn from each other and we can really produce the best results. I think you can say that we're very physical people, so even though it's starting to be a really big effort, every 2 years we meet on the base of this mountain called Snøhetta, and we climb this mountain together. It's a big investment, even in terms of CO2. We're totally aware of that. We try to compensate our flights, which is maybe more of a mathematical exercise, but we think it's essential for the culture of our company to do things together. So it's a typical team building exercise. It's quite exposed landscape. So this is a guy from the New York office helping one of my colleagues from the Adelaide office to cross this river. And we do this not only to get to know each other, but to really be aware of our physical surrounding, because that is what we are doing. We are creating our physical surroundings for the future. And that's why this also relates to this very urgent topic of urban planning in context of sustainability. You need to know what you're dealing with, and it's your physical surrounding. It's not only how it looks, it's how it feels, it's how it smells. It's really your context of your body. And so I'm not going to talk a lot about the old projects that maybe many of you have seen, like, for example, the Opera House in Oslo. But what I wanted to say with, for example, this picture is also with this building, it's really about changing the perception of your physical surrounding. It's not about what the building looks like. It's really what the building can do for the people. So why did we design a building that many think looks like an iceberg? What we try to do here is to shift the paradigm of what a cultural building can do for the people of a country. Yeah, so it was a big investment, €500 million for a cultural building, for an opera house. And at the time, it was in 2001, we won the competition. There was a statistical survey that 3% of the Norwegian population was interested in opera. So you have, and Norway is not a very big country, population-wise, so you have a handful of people, and you have a big financial investment. And to bring these together, we decided that we'd make this building available for everybody, and not only for an elitist minority. So people can access the fjord, people can walk on the roof, and they do so. Currently, it's about 1.5 million people that use this roof every year without even knowing that it's an opera house, or they know that it's an opera house, but they use it as a public space. And they use it in ways that maybe we haven't even intended for. So nobody said you can ski on the roof of the opera house, but nobody said you couldn't either. So it's the possibilities that we create with our spaces that trigger something we call an ownership in the people. So it's really this image of making places for people, creating an emotional relationship of the people to their physical environment, which is so essential for what we call social sustainability. We've done that in New York with the Times Square renovation, where, again, the possibilities what you can do on a public square or on a public surface has totally shifted through the execution of this project. Going back to the Opera House typology, this is a project in Shanghai, where in the competition brief, it was actually mentioned that the roof had to be walkable. This is something I guess, or we guess, they took out from the Oslo Opera House. Still, we won the competition, and it's now being built. And here you see a building from the construction site, from this huge building. It's about 3 times the size of the Opera House in Oslo. And I love that we are doing these things, creating places for interaction also in an Asian context. But there are some things about these images that I really find disturbing. And currently, I really have to say, I'm a bit ambivalent to what is happening here, because we are pouring tens of thousands of tons of concrete to make this possible. And this is a topic I really want to talk about today in detail, is what are we looking at if we talk about CO2 emissions? You're probably aware that especially in Central Europe or in Western Europe, in Austria, Germany, Switzerland, for the last 30 years, we have been very good at calculating and improving the performances of our buildings in terms of operative energy consumption. So passive house buildings, really exceptional numbers with 25 centimeters of insulation material that is probably fossil-based, with constructions, with building services, mechanical ventilation services that eat up 30-35% of our building budgets just to improve this part, the use stage of the building. We have fantastic numbers, but it's only a part of the picture. And what I really want to talk about today is what is happening before and after this use stage. Because in many construction projects, we see that this A1 and so this stage going all the way from raw material supply to transport, to manufacturing, again to transport to the construction site, and construction site installation can easily eat up more than 50% of your total CO2 budget. Easily 50%. And this widening the perspective or the calculation, not only to the operational CO2 consumption, but to this whole life cycle, this is super important. We got aware of this topic about 15 years ago. We tried to really understand what was necessary to address this topic, and like so often, it was actually refurbishment projects that the first ones we tried to tackle this mathematical exercise of being truly CO2 negative in the whole life cycle. So these are a series of office buildings in an area close to Oslo, typical concrete slab office buildings from the 1970s, very poor facade quality, very low floor-to-ceiling height, all those situations that we have to deal with when we work with our old building substances. And what we did, we stripped the building, we completely changed the ventilation system. We introduced, really challenging the code with this project, a very low-speed airflow system, so we don't have any ventilation ducts. The ventilation goes through this central open staircase. We have open floor plans, but because, of course, we cannot provide fresh air to individual cell offices, which, of course, has an impact not only on the design of the building, but also on the culture of working together in these sort of buildings. So you have to accept that with open floor plans, you can have more innovative, for example, ventilation strategies. And then from these renovation projects, the point I really need to make about these buildings is the investment into CO2 for the general structure has already been done 40 years ago. So in this calculation, you don't have to recalculate the CO2 that is embodied in the concrete. You can just take it, everything else you add, and there we then really look at the CO2 footprint of, for example, the facade cladding material, where here we use timber with a charring, so we burn the wood. But the main driver for the big numbers of CO2 have already been written off. That's why really the reuse of existing structures is so important. Of course, then we try to go into new builds, smaller projects, more experimental projects. This is a little school in Drøbak, close to Oslo, and actually a private family house where we really try to use only existing materials. But what you'll see in these projects that the amount of photovoltaics, of course, is always very big, because we need to produce the energy in order to compensate for the energy that we initially inject into the building in the construction phase. So all these buildings are optimized in terms of energy harvesting. They have these big PV roofs, and the geometry of the building is strongly influenced by this idea of making them almost power plants. So this is called the Powerhouse Brattørkaia. We founded a consortium with a construction company and a research facility from the University of Trondheim, where we really went deep into the production chain, so the whole life cycle of the building materials, because this is definitely one of the great challenges we have. We as architects, we can try to find out how much is there CO2 in a cubic meter of concrete, but it's very difficult to retrieve the data from the industry. Once we go higher, the geometry changes because, of course, there's more volume in relation to its footprint. So, for example, for this building, this is called Powerhouse Telemark in about 2 hours west of Oslo. Because this is a 9-story building, we had to increase the size of the roof, and that's why it has this funny shape. But the funny shape is only in order for us to allow to really produce this amount of energy. So the whole roof, again, is made for PV. Another project from Norway that I would like to make you aware of, this is called Gullhaugtorg. It's a mixed-use project, a developer project. So we have 2 stories of retail and gastronomy. We have 4 stories of office use, and then residential on top. And what's interesting about this building, similarly to the renovation project for the first powerhouse, is that we're working only with natural ventilation. This is an exercise that is really actually something that you need to investigate closely. You know, do you have energy losses through the use of only natural ventilation? Of course, any building mechanics engineer will tell you, oh, you have these energy losses in winter. But you have to do the whole calculation, and sometimes actually, you know, ventilation systems, they consume energy. You you increase the floor-to-ceiling height, you increase the building volume. So there's a lot of parameters that go into this calculation. And what we did in this project is that we tried to use the drivers from the environmental context, so the situation of the wind in this specific site and the solar gains that were present at this site to influence the building geometry. So similarly to the Powerhouse Telemark project where the size of the roof was determining the geometry of the building, here it's actually the wind direction that helps us to naturally ventilate the building and created this kind of awkward hexagonal shape on the building footprint. Again, to create some sort of ventilation improvements for the building. We're using for this building, the structure is not in timber because in Norway, currently you cannot build a tower in timber. This is really an interesting situation. 60 kilometers from here in Aspen, we have a tower which is 80 meters tall, which is built in timber, which is currently totally unthinkable, for example, here in Slovakia. I don't know why this fire burned differently in Austria than it does here in Slovakia. What is the reason for that? Again, also here in Norway, it was not allowed to use timber for the main structure of the building, but for the facade, we have a timber solution. And of course, again, like in the early projects, it's not only about the functionality of the building, of course, it's also about the social context it provides. So it's now under construction. It will be opened this fall. I'm going to show you another little prototype. That's why we call the lecture Creating Prototypes, because like I said many times in smaller projects with private clients that are daring to, for example, challenge the code, where you can have a qualified discussion and really ask questions that go beyond the norm. This is an office building for a thriving company close to Innsbruck, where we have our Austrian branch office. An office space for 65 employees, a 4-story building, completely constructed in timber. And as an introduction, I'll show you a little video. So this is a very schematic section of the building, and all you see here is totally not rocket science. It's just a collection of small measures that in total improve the overall quality of the building. So what have we done? It's a timber structure, even with a concrete core and a concrete basement. We have a rather innovative west-facing facade, which is fully glazed, which you'd think is impossible, but because we have this green shading device that I'll show you in a little bit more detail, it actually works really well for the passive strategies of the building. We have a rainwater cistern that waters the plants that are on the facades, and so on. We have open space office, and again, we're using this topic of natural ventilation, which I really have to say, not dogmatically is better, but in some situation, it actually can provide a really interesting solution. So once you enter the building, I think the building is rather humble from the outside. You don't see a lot, but on the inside, I have to say, it's great. Every time I go there, it smells well. The people are nice. You look into the nature. You have a lot of nature inside. The omnipresent amount of timber. I am surprised over and over again that it's not like maybe some of you understand the terminology, Almhütte. It does not feel like that. It feels super modern and super comfortable. And I think it really represents the idea of how sustainability can improve the atmosphere and the working quality of your building. It's an open space office, so all the 65 employees sit in one open space. There's no doors between the workplaces, which is the horror for many people. When they tell them you're going to be in an open space office, but you don't actually notice that you're in an open space because we have grouped the people, we have put in meeting rooms in between, but in general, it's one open plan. We also have three-dimensional openings. We have a very low floor-to-ceiling height. Under the beam, it's 2.4 meters. Totally unacceptable for some real estate developers. You say you have 2.40 meters. Yeah, but we can do this because we are modulating the height. We have some really open areas where we have two-story openings. It's a very bright building. We only have around 16 square meters per employee, including all amenities and the canteen. So it's actually a rather tight building. But because the quality of the space is so good, we can allow for this very tight packing of employees. Here you can see the facade. So this is west-facing. We get a lot of solar gains. But we have this green curtain that we also use as a balcony, or the other way around. We use the balcony to introduce this green curtain. The employees can use the balcony for phone calls, for little informal meetings. We have around 15 plant species, or I think it's around 18, that are growing in large volume pots. You can't see the pots here really. That are irrigated, and they're irrigated rather smartly. So we have different irrigation cycles for the north facade, for the east facade, for the west facade, and for the south facade. So you really need to, if you do this sort of a green facade, you really need to do it thoroughly and take care of the plants. Otherwise, they'll die away, and it will be ridiculous. But here it actually worked quite well. We chose the plants in a way that the blooming cycles overlap, so you have flowers all year long, which is fantastic. Even in November, we have some plants that have some buds. So it also increases this aspect of biophilia. People feel really well in this building. And in winter, all the leaves fall off, and you get all these solar gains. So the building heats up almost by itself. This is also the reason we were at all able to do this with this very passive cooling and ventilation strategy. So like I said, there is no ventilation system. Of course, there is a ventilation strategy. So all the opaque facade panels that you can see here, they're operable. They are controlled by a smart building systems. And we have CO2 sensors all around the building, temperature sensors, wind sensors, pressure sensors inside and outside that automatically operate these flaps and that can control the interior climate 100% automatically. So in the summer, of course, if it's warm outside, the building tries to cool down in the evening. We have a heat pump, and of course we have geothermal to cool down the building passively in the nights. And during daytime, these flaps operate automatically to condition the indoor climate. And it really works well because not only does the building provide an ideal working climate, but it also provides a very direct contact to the outside. So people, when the flaps open, you notice, oh, it's raining outside, or it's actually a bit cool today outside. I'll quickly grab a sweater. but we think that is totally acceptable to have a slight variation of temperature. So this is not 23 degrees all year long. In winter, sometimes you have 22, and in summer, sometimes you have 26. It's within the code, it's totally acceptable, but you have a relationship to the outside. And that's what I think you can call this a green building. And so for this project, we did the whole CO2 calculation. We saved, in relationship to a fully concrete building, we saved 353 tons of CO2, which is a bit, yeah. It's better than not saving the 350 tons of CO2. It could have been more if we, for example, also would have swapped the lift shaft in concrete and so on. But again, here was fire regulations that made these kind of strategies very difficult to execute. But what it did do is it made us calculate the numbers. And why am I saying this? Is because we need to know what we're doing in order to improve. And nobody currently in Europe actually knows in detail. We can talk about reducing our CO2 footprint, but most people don't know how to calculate. We don't even get the numbers from the industry. And this is something we need to change and something that will change. So for example, in Denmark, and I'm so happy that Schmidt-Hammerlassen will talk about this today, there is now a regulation for these numbers. Currently, the regulation, what they are, so you don't, I think it's very interesting. You know, the country of Denmark is saying you have a hard limit to how much CO2 you're allowed to emit in the life cycle stage of the building. It's a 50-year calculation. So it's a number which is 12 kilograms CO2 equivalent per square meter of GFA per year on a 50-year calculation. We'll have to get used to these numbers because we'll need to be able to calculate them because Denmark is not going to be the only country in Europe who is doing this. I know that now also in the Netherlands they're starting to prepare for this, and with EU taxonomy regulations, this will be spread throughout Europe. And if I ask around my colleagues in Austria, everybody's talking about sustainability, but nobody knows how to calculate these numbers. So I think by introducing hard limits, we all will need to be aware of the numbers. We will understand, is 12 kilos ambitious, or is it mediocre, or is it nothing? Currently, I don't even know. But in 3 years, when we meet here next time, you will say, oh, we did the last project with 5. Wow, that's fantastic. And I really hope that this, you know, everybody always knows about cost. Oh, how much did your office building cost? 2,350 euros per square meter. Oh, that's a lot. We did the last one for 1,800. And we all know, you know, our clients know and the municipalities know. But with the CO2 emissions, we all have the blah, blah. So I really think this is so important to get our heads into those numbers. And I really have to say, I love concrete. I'm an Austrian architect. We're close to Vorarlberg, close to Switzerland. They love concrete. It's a fantastic building material, but it's a real problem because Portland cement and the use of concrete is in charge of more than 12% of the global CO2 emissions. It's crazy. It's more than transport. You know, we can talk about electric cars for a long time, but nobody talks about. Some people talk about concrete. We need to talk about concrete more. And replacement or strategies to reduce the CO2 impact of the concrete. And that's where I actually sometimes think we need to almost go beyond the life cycle assessment and think about, you know, life cycle 50 years from now, it's 2073. I mean, the planet, if we don't act now, the planet's going to have a real problem in 2073. And so like I say, life cycle calculation, it's a good thing we're doing it, but we need to save emitting, or we need to reduce emitting CO2 right now. So that's why we really have to reduce the use of concrete. What can we do about it? We can even try to refuse the use of concrete. So I'll show you one example. This is the Budapest Massive Plan that has been talked about very briefly today. And it's a big real estate development in in the city of Budapest, mostly student housing, some office facilities, some, of course, communal facilities, some existing structures where here in the center, sorry, the pointer doesn't work, in the center you see an old market hall that really gives the space a good atmosphere. What we did for the project is we reintroduced a feeling of being in contact with the water. I like here. I mean, it's great. And in Budapest, you also have a few of those boats. But in general, the Danube is not accessible. There's a lot of, on both sides, on both banks, there is tramways and cars and fences, and then there is a naturally, artificially regulated bank. Nobody is actually in touch with the water. And this part of Budapest is not on the actual Danube. You see the Danube in the back, but here you see a canal which is regulated, already a very old canal. But here the water table is quite stable, so here you actually have the possibility for the people to interact with the water, with all the qualities that it brings, evaporative cooling, atmospheric qualities. You can introduce a lot of planting, and we were very aware of all these topics of blue and green infrastructure. I hope somebody will be talking about this today. It is the way you deal with water in your city quarters, not putting it into the sewage system, but using the water very actively with open retention areas, sort of this hybrid between functional environmental systems and recreational areas. But what we also did in this project, together with the client, which was the municipalities, is we developed a mobility strategy in order to completely avoid underground structures. Because the problem with concrete is that for above ground structures, we have solutions that are currently mostly regulated by problems with code, but we can build, like I said, an 80-meter tall building in timber, it's no problem. We have, like I said, challenges with regulation, challenges with the building industry that needs to change. But below ground, we're still stuck. We need concrete. So what can we do? We can change the mobility behavior. And so for this project, we suggested a series of parking houses on the perimeter of the site, and the whole site is only accessed by pedestrians. So this is what you get: public transport, people, vegetation, and a very vibrant urban quality. And this is what I talked about, blue and green infrastructure. These areas here, they are ecological systems that clean the runoff from the building tops and from the public plazas through a series of plants and environmental systems that really increase the water quality, also that runs off into the canal, and at the same time really creates great outdoor spaces. So this one is about reducing the use of concrete. Please challenge your structural engineers. Normally, you can, if he tells you it's going to be a 24-centimeter slab, most likely you can go with 18 or 16. It's just they're lazy. I really have to, sorry, I hope no structural engineers here. And we have, for example, developed a slab system that is this kind of trapezoid, like a corrugated metal sheet, but it's made of concrete, where we have all the technical installations embedded, and we can reduce the amount of concrete by 40%. So if we have to use concrete, you have to be smart and challenge your engineer and maybe invent new solutions. We can remix. We can't, but we can get involved. So polymer concretes will hopefully play an important role, and actually what I'm really hoping for is that they develop really quickly, and that in 20 years' time we actually have concrete that does not emit CO2 on an industrial scale, and that we can then again use concrete, but currently we're not there. So we're involved in a project called Safe Rock. It's a research project that is really thoroughly investing and investigating the use of geopolymers for the use for substituting Portland cement in concrete mixes. What can you also do? You can try to capture, so retard. We're also involved in a project that's called Biocrete, where we use char to capture carbon in the concrete, which makes it CO2 neutral. The performance of the concrete is currently still rather poor, so you can only use it for low demand purposes, but there are different strategies around the world that use different ways of capturing carbon in concrete, so I think this is also very interesting, but again, we need to challenge the industry. But the most reasonable way to go right now, I think, is replacing. Yeah? We need to replace concrete. And we can do so through timber, which I've showed. We can also think about other construction materials like rammed earth. We're in close contact with a company called Leemtoon Erde, Martin Rauch, maybe some of you have heard about them, and they have gone from small boutique projects now really into an industrial scale where they really are investigating the use of rammed earth for commercial building projects. So they can do 3-story residential projects with a 35-centimeter pre-rammed earth, elements that are produced either on site or in their production facility in Vorarlberg, shipped to the location and then put up. But of course, this is also something where we need to challenge code, where we need to challenge clients. You know, currently the construction cost in building with rammed earth is more expensive, obviously, but these are things that need to change. So we have a project in Switzerland here. I have not shown this ever. This is a school for a boarding school for international students in the town of Gstaad, where we use a timber structure. And in this one, we're really investigating thoroughly the use of timber rammed earth hybrid ceiling systems. It's not something we invented. It's actually Herzog Demeron who spent a lot of money and energy into this system. I think it's so beautiful. It's absolutely fantastic. It's only compression on the rammed earth element. The rammed earth has no reinforcement whatsoever. There's no artificial reinforcement like carbon fiber or steel, and there's no natural reinforcement like straw. But because it's under compression, we all know that there are only compressive forces, and it works. So the span of the rammed earth element is only about 80 centimeters, so they're not huge fields. So still there's a lot of timber involved. But what we can do is we have thermal mass, we have good acoustic properties, we have good hydrological qualities for the air. And it's somehow funny because it's this hybrid between super low tech, using excavation material from your construction site, but at the same time using high tech like this ramming robot in order to be efficient and do this on an industrial scale. And the numbers are just fantastic. You know, if you compare the primary energy use, we're down to a quarter from a typical concrete slab. Cost is a bit higher, but if you compare the relationship of use of primary energy to the increasing cost, this should be neglectable. Other projects we're currently working on here, you can see a university project. It's an existing university in the town of Klagenfurt in southern Austria. We won the competition for this extension of this university. And so I think it also relates well to this idea of how does, not urban design, but how does your general conception of a building have an impact on its environmental performance? So in the competition brief, what they asked for, here you can see the lake in the back, Wörthersee, which is only about half a kilometer away, and the director had this idea of making a tower so that from the rooftop you could have your Aperol looking down to the lake. What we thought, you know, going back to the Opera House in Oslo and other buildings where we've realized this spaces for interaction, we think a horizontal building is much more appropriate for a university. You know, we don't have 12 compartments where people are isolated and maybe they meet in the elevator lobby. We think really a university building needs to be about exchange of ideas and knowledge. So we made this very horizontal building with the effect, of course, that we have a large roof surface where we get in daylight from the north and produce huge amounts of electricity with the south-facing elements of this roof. So all the building is actually a huge flat timber structure and the shed roof on top and a space where people can meet. Finally, so I'm almost finished with my lecture, I want to talk about the project, which is about 6-7 minutes away from here. It's a real estate development. It's a huge plot. It's a super interesting project when we discuss aspects of how does urban design and strategies of urban planning influence our built environment and our future of living in the cities. We know that Bratislava is still growing on the outskirts, which is not a development that we think is a good development, because we need to really enforce these ideas of the 15-minute city. We have to create the possibilities for people to change their mobility behavior. I hear this a lot in the Central European countries. No, our people don't want to get rid of their cars. But if I talk to my students at the TU in Vienna, people, 22, 25 years of age, they don't even have driver's license. Half of the people don't have driving licenses, because the city works so well. And these things will come to Bratislava, and these things will come to Prague and Budapest. And so I think here we need to be very forward-leaned and create dense urban areas in the close proximity to the center of the city. And what we've done here is create this area in very close relationship to the nature. So here, for the people sitting in the back, you probably can't see it. It's the Danube. This is the South Bank area. You see the highway in the back. So we're kind of facing the Danube, facing north. We have this strip of protected landscape in between, and the whole master plan design and the design of the building is really all about creating a space in tight collaboration with nature. So we have excessive planting throughout the development on the buildings. We have a series of public spaces that have a variety of functions, creating big diversity for the use of spaces. We have spaces that are more about play and children. We have spaces that are more about quietness and being calm. We have spaces that are more for culture. And so creating this variety of differentiated possibilities, I think, is very important for the future of our cities. And all the other strategies will need to both challenge the regulations and challenge the client to go the extra mile to develop a truly sustainable neighborhood. And I will finish with this one and hope you have a lot of questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick. I think you can choose a seat.
Okay.
Or I'll be polite. So this.
So we start with the panel discussion of the first block, and I would like to give a warm welcome to our next two panelists. Ladies first, so Mrs. Milota Sidorová, Vice President for Spatial Planning, Authority for Spatial Planning and Construction of the Slovak Republic, please. And Mr. Marián, Hlavačka, CEO of CORWIN.
Hello.
Actually, I can calculate the CO2 for our building.
Very good, very good.
And I calculated in the meantime when you finished. And Einpark has 70 grams per year.
70 grams per year?
Yeah, CO2 per square meter. You said that the Danish guys, they introduced the new law, maximum 12 kilograms per square meter. And I calculated fast our building, and it has 70 grams.
And it includes the whole life cycle?
No, actually, it's only in use. So maybe if we include this one, maybe we'll go to 300 grams.
Okay.
So we are far, far below the Danish regulation. Just, you said nobody can calculate, so I calculated it.
Oh, I think we will challenge you.
Sorry, I interrupted the start of the panel, but...
That's exactly what I wanted to ask about, so you answered the question. And I can maybe carry on with another question then, when Mr. Hlavačka started. you were obviously talking about your building, which is actually the first zero carbon building in Slovakia. So my question would be, and I think it's a question interesting for all the audience, what is the challenge for the developer and what does it bring to the city thinking this way, and how do you see that in the future or near future, because we're talking about 2030, 2050?
Well, it's you don't build a first zero carbon building like your first building, okay? So you start somewhere and you develop. So for us, it took like 13 years to come to a point where we could achieve this goal. And what it brings to the city, I think it brings just inspiration, right? It should bring the inspiration. It's an office building, so some of the companies who already has the ESG and EU taxonomy and zero CO2 emission strategy, they joined the building. I'm very proud that also the Slovak companies joined the building. So it's not only the international ones. You guys who are coming from not Slovakia, you would be also surprised that not all the big names who are operating here in Slovakia are so green, okay? So some of them I will not name them.
Please don't.
I will not name them. It's not necessary, but it's a big Fortune 500 company, and they are even lowering the amount of full-time employees, and they are changing their corporate structure in order not to be stressed because of the EU taxonomy rules. Okay, so not all the big guys from international community are the ones who are bringing to Slovakia, let's say, the good vibes and the good. So there are also Slovak companies who are already, far. And I think we should be not these Janošiks with tough head, as one Czech journalist said about Slovaks. We should be the ones who are proud that we achieved something, and we should do more marketing about Slovakia and Bratislava. So this is a strong appeal on all of us that we should be proud of what we achieved and not be the ones who are sitting in the corner saying we are the small Slovaks and we always get the slaps from right and left.
So being too humble is sometimes maybe not the best, but staying humble is sometimes the way how to improve, and we can all agree probably that we are in this topic in a learning process and nothing is perfect. So coming to my next question, if I can take word and ask next question, you, Milota, I read an article where you used a really interesting term of fair spatial planning. And in this discussion, you expressed that you see the city and a spatial planning in a way that the amenities are there for people, the amenities are close. And the word natural, as you discussed or you introduced in your speech, Patrick, is the way how to create the cities. So what is the biggest challenge, you think? Why, or is it working this way, or is it becoming working this way? Milota, what do you think? What is the situation and how to improve it?
Like in Bratislava or where?
In Bratislava, in Slovakia. Let's focus on the toughest environment.
Okay. First things, I don't know the questions. I got invitation yesterday, so you know me, I can speak very well on many things. And if you want to have a current lecture on how I think land use planning must connect to strategical planning, ergo financial planning, we can go into that. Or I can take the position of my new job, and we can talk about legislation, where I think we have to discuss the fairness as well. I think you choose.
Speak up your mind. What do you think is the most important for our audience to hear?
Okay, so I will go with the flow. Very impressive lecture, except of maybe the last slide, there was a high qualitative steep, I must say. I was thinking, what is problem with Slovakia? Why do we always have to make this steroid, like urbanism, towers and things? So remote. This is at the core of the question. We build out of scale, and we still do build out of scale. And there are some legal problems or legal forces that are forcing us to build this way for decades. And one of them is transportation norm, you know, like amount of transport and parking spaces we still have to do, despite the market changes, despite people walk more and use less, and we still go ahead with these transportation norms. So I take this note very seriously. So from the position of the authority for construction, we now go and maybe we will face a very bitter battle over these norms because we think they should be much more in favor of people and public spaces. Second thing, and I think this is like touching the God in Czechoslovakia, you know. We have something like this norm for lighting that comes. So whatever you do, eventually it will become something like this, you know, the tower, because you have to provide the sun into every apartment, and if the apartment, if the building doesn't have this, then everything is cancelled. I've been through numerous international competitions where some beautiful Danish architect brought compact, you know, things. And then it went through this norm, and we couldn't build anything. Question with this lighting norm, which is really crucial today. Why do we have to build places like Petržalka? Why do we have to face and turn the buildings towards south to increase the amount of light? I tell you when this norm was created. It was 1955. Then the hygiene, the state hygiene, I would say chief, came and said it has to be abiding for everyone. And architects didn't have any rights. At that time, hygiene was really maybe different. But since then, nobody touched it. We are only taking this and taking this. So this is my next battle. I'm choosing to challenge through this and all the representatives of this bureau. So we will go to the Ministry of Healthcare and we tell them we need to make this norm voluntarily, not obligatory. And I think this is the best contribution for all of you architects and developers, so then we can build, again, more compact. We don't have to go only into towers. We can create human scale. And we know that the square meter, every square meter in the city is very expensive. And the more efficiently we use those square meters, the more amenities we can put in there. So I hope I'm answering your question. I don't think these two norms are fair compared to what we are facing today. And we will take this very seriously to open it, so then you can make maybe higher quality architecture. So then maybe the last slide can look like Budapest slide, which I enjoyed very much. But I understand you are in certain conditions and they are very tough. But still, very nice try.
Thank you.
Okay.
Maybe I just say a few words to this. This was just a great speech. Really,
thank you.
This norm, this parking norm and this lighting norm, this is a crazy headache for us, a crazy headache, because you have to build a lot of parking spaces. And then you go to the Department of Transportation of Bratislava, and the only thing you hear, build more. You don't have enough parking spaces. So it's a circle. On one way, there is a sustainability issue and vision of Bratislava, and the next day, you get a slap because you have to build more, create more traffic, etc. And you are in one circle, and you can't go out. So if you, as an authority representative, are raising these two issues, which when I was preparing for today, I was having notes, and these two were in bold and capital letters that I want to mention it. You took it from my speech. The guys can confirm it when we discussed it. We said we have to mention the parking norm and the lighting norm as the ones who are killing the compact, healthy, and green city. So thank you for that.
So in the matter, I'm looking maybe for some support, because when this goes out, I will be accused of being developer's girl, you know. So, and I think we all want to create more compact and ecological places. And all the buildings that will be facing south will need to have air conditioning and extra energy to cool itself. So maybe if in the past we were looking for sun, maybe in the future we are looking for more natural form of shadowing. So why don't we allow the geometry of the building to do that for us? This is my climate answer.
Yep, I think agreed, or I don't think there's anyone in this room who would disagree, and thank you because you answered some questions we probably would not dare to ask, so that's why we tried with some we felt like are less specific, so thank you very much for your intervention. And if I may continue, we have some questions from Slido, thank you very much, and the one I was thinking of probably, if I may start with not exactly what you mentioned, but probably, and seeing your very complex approach to, or Snøhetta's approach to sustainability, how do you, or do architects in your office think about the social and economic degrowth? So is this something you consider from the point of view of sustainability?
Yes, absolutely. Degrowth there was a topic of a conference we led in Oslo a few years ago. For example, the requirement or the market, this is a very difficult topic because the market is saying one thing. We as people who are trying to build sustainably, we are convinced that there are strategies that are necessary. For example, the use of square meters of residential space per capita. Yeah, we know in Germany for around 47 square meters, which is way too much. But when we talk to developers, they say, well, this is what the market demands. I think it's a quality question more than a quantity question. Mm-hmm. And I think we can actually design spaces that are much more effective and efficient for people to use less real estate, yeah? Which is has a massive impact, but it's a question to society, not only to architecture. We can only provide the solutions and engage in conversations. But we do see big demand for new buildings. Also disrespecting this question of how much do you need as an individual inhabitant. We see cities growing, and the idea of only using existing structures, it's also not correct. It's not going to work. Many times we're facing situations, just have a project in Munich where there was an existing parking garage from the 1980s. We thought we could use the structure for refurbishing it and making a cool mobility hub, co-creation space, and here wasn't even the economic questions that didn't turn out, but the structure was just too weak and it was broken down. It was not capable of being renovated in a way that would be meaningful. So we had to take it down, and of course this is the reality we're facing. So I think degrowth as an idea in general, yes, let's look for solutions where we can build as little as possible or renovate as much as possible of the existing structures, but I think it's an illusion to think that we can stop building in the next few years. It will be necessary to still build new structures.
Thank you very much.
Patrick, I will maybe stop by just for a while and ask a very straight question, because you are coming from a different environment, but you are also familiar with the environment we have here. And from your experience and what you said in your speech, in terms of the CO2 or in terms of the understanding of CO2, we can say we are on the same line. We are on the same bottom line of understanding, but still the projects outside of Slovakia, or some of the projects highlighted in your presentation, seem to be more advanced, seem to be designed and built with a different approach. Are you able or successful to do the same here, or what are the biggest challenges you have here with working in this people and environment, let's say? Is it the mindset, is it the legislation, or is it a combination? How would you define it very briefly?
I think there are two main aspects. The one is code, regulations, like we said, parking, fire regulations, these kind of things.
We have some audience who could help with that, probably.
And
please hear us.
the second one is the building industry. I really have to say that so it's the processes of how to build a building, also with economical safety for a developer. You know, if you build a resi block, you say you can write on a little piece of paper, A5, write 46 apartments in concrete with standard thermal insulation, and then you'll get a price offer from 4 general contractors that will be 10-15% deviation depending on their occupation. No problem, and you start to build. If you do the same with an innovative solution, a timber building or maybe timber clay hybrid solution, you'll have to first make a huge tender documentation, and then you'll get 3 price offers or 2, and the price will vary 200% because the construction industry is I need to say, conservative and doesn't want to change. You know, it's very easy to pour concrete. It's very easy. And to change these processes, we also, I think, it will not come naturally if we don't have either incentives, for example, tax incentives for low emission construction. You know, if once everybody is able to calculate, the politicians can decide on different strategies. Either you have a penalty for high emissions in the construction process, or you have benefits, tax benefits, or maybe even regulation benefits. You can say, okay, you can build with a density of 2.5 in this area if you have a standard solution. If you improve your carbon footprint, you get 3. And then as soon as the economic mechanisms change and it makes it more interesting for the developer to also invest into innovative solutions, then we're a real step closer. And then the industry will react, which is something I really have to say we're seeing in Germany. And Germany is a big market over the last 2 years. The way we have received briefs for competitions has completely flipped. In general, I have to say, not for residential, but for example, for mixed use of our office project, clients are demanding timber structures. And they want to know from us how to do it. And the construction industry will follow.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. We already heard that the net zero carbon building is here. We heard that it's operational carbon. Mr. Hlavačka, what do you think the next challenge will be? The embodied carbon. What do you think will be the challenge for the market, or what will be the driver for the manufacturers, for example, to listen to you and to do something about it?
Well, there is no manufacturer of CLT panels in Slovakia for today, so that's one problem. We can import it from Austria. We had the intention to do it.
Is usually our route from Slovakia also?
We had a plan 2 years ago in our Palma project to have a timber construction, but after 2 years of extreme fighting and the teams were, exhausted, we give up with the fire regulation, and we even talked to the president of the fire brigade here in Slovakia. So there was nobody above who could say, I can overrule this opinion. So unfortunately, this is, for today, it's no good news in Slovakia regarding timber. But still, there is good hope that with, ladies like this, with courage and, with this experience and background, can change also the, let's say, the policy makers' environment. Because we are talking about this for years. It's not a new issue in Bratislava, right? I'm hearing many times this saying that why don't we get the good fire, why don't we get parking, etc. So I think this is great that I'm here and I could hear it with my own ears, that there will be this impulse to this environment and wake up call that we should catch Europe, and EU taxonomy is coming anyway. We are EU land. This is also a good thing for Slovakia that we are part of EU. So we have to take over.
Yeah, I will just add to this, since you were both mentioning fire department, and maybe you know that we were working past few months on Vyhláška, I don't know how to translate, is like small law.
Executive regulation.
Yeah, nice. About how to create digital master plans, what, layers should be in, where is the culture, what do we understand at the term value, etc., etc. So there is this rozporové konanie, so people are coming. Until now, 5 ministries agreed with us, so I guess we were successful. And one of them was Ministry of Interior. It was came 3 ladies in uniforms, firemen, very strict ladies, and they said, okay, but maybe we need to make the distance from the buildings wider so the fire doesn't, go from spread. Yes, exactly. Yeah. So, well, this is material solution. I don't want Slovakia to be a land of family units, houses like Kartince, blop, blop, blop. They understood, So we have to work together. So then they start to talk about timber as construction materials. So they mentioned something like they are okay with 4 floors. When they come to 5 floors, maybe they have to figure about something else. So I asked them about Aspern and this tower. They said they didn't even hear about that. But they were quite open to discussion, so I guess this should be our next target, maybe not to go alone.
We will invite them for this trip to Vienna. It's not far away.
And they mentioned that Europe is changing, so they have to somehow, so I can sense the gentle breeze of, change. So I guess
think you will now, I'm sorry, Milota.
Timber is going to be also the topic of the second blog, by the way.
So that you don't tell all the messages before the end of conference.
I'm very efficient.
Because, no, the only reason why I'm mentioning, and I'm really grateful for your intervention, it's just that the second blog is actually talking about the initiative because we also perceive this as an issue and we would like to be helpful. So thank you very much for introducing.
No, I'm just giving you a floor to be more optimistic and focus on the action rather than how do we do it, just do it,
Mm-hmm.
Agree.
Very good. So just to wrap up somehow, I think despite maybe the feeling that there might be some differences, opinions, I think we are all on the same spot, and we all can agree that we should build spaces for people, first of all. I'm stealing a couple of words from your presentation, Patrick. Ownership in people is important. We should think more about natural and passive ways of doing design, passive ways of doing maybe looking at a lifestyle. And the 3 words you used, refuse, reuse, remix, we need to start to learn how to implement these words into the design and construction. And we need to update the legislation. Otherwise, the leverage will be not enough. So we are closely coming to the end of the panel discussion. So I would very kindly like to ask you for the last idea, last sentence you want our audience to take home.
Maybe I just read one question from Slido regarding the brownfields, because
yes, please.
It was not mentioned here, and I think for Bratislava especially, and many other Slovak cities, if you walk through the cities, there are such ugly neighborhoods when you enter some cities. I will not name them, and they are just perfect for redevelopment, and not to build. For example, in Bratislava, the vineyards, why to build on the vineyards, the great vineyards. If you look in Vienna, how the city is beautiful with their vineyards, city vineyards. So I would not touch the vineyards anymore in Bratislava. I would not even touch, the, how do you say, orna poda in English? I don't know.
Yeah.
The fields. I will not touch the fields. Why? We have, Bratislava City Council prepared a study. There is 630 hectares of brownfields here inside the city. I calculated again fast, and I think we can achieve 80,000 flats. 80,000 flats. 80,000 flats inside Bratislava. And everybody knows, I hope, that if you build inside, the cost of Bratislava City Council will go down, because the square kilometer, you have just less tubes, less transportation, less everything. So it's easy, it's easy just to implement it.
I would just add that EU taxonomy is also encouraging using of brownfields instead of agricultural land. So hopefully again, with legislation and the mindset, we will slowly achieve and go to the goal which we have and the targets which we set. Milota, from your side, last thoughts?
No, I think it's 53 seconds till the end, so I thank you very much, and we'll be staying here. So as this is maybe first time I meet you in this position, I would like to get in touch with you, and congratulations on it. I didn't want to be so negative, just to highlight what we have to change.
Thank you. Patrick?
Thank you very much. Well, I'm not going to defend the Bratislava project that we did. It was developed under the current regulation. That's why it looks the way it looks. And we try to do the best in this context, and I think it's going to be a great project anyway, you know. And the second thing I want to say in the end is, like I said, I don't know, 15 times today, we need to know the numbers, but we must not forget the architecture. So knowing the numbers is hygiene, and doing good spaces for people is the absolute necessity. So I think we need to do both. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Nothing to add to this. I think that's why we have invited you today, and the fact that conceptual role of architect in really reducing the CO2 emissions has been very much emphasized throughout of your presentation, and I think the message got through.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And for the audience, our guests are staying here for, you can carry on the discussions. Please, physical
Milota,
fights are not allowed here if somebody feels touched.
And yes, this is like, because you are the first lady from whom we will thank, we haven't really rehearsed it yet, so.
Thank you very much for coming here.